Hey guys, so we have covered quite a few details, but we will continue in this section. In this video, we will talk about microservice ecosystem, the remote configuration, and Here we start. So how we deal with application configuration right now without microservice. So let's review that a little bit. So first we develop application, then we create config properties in properties files. We push our code to GitHub, and continuous integration Jenkins job runs. Build archive is pushed to Artifactory, and then continuous deployment Jenkins job runs and deploys web archive to Tomcat instances. Property files need changes, but code has not changed. That's a very typical scenario, right? So you want to change your database URL, but the code has 100% remained unchanged. That kind of a scenario. So in these scenarios, we need to go through the cumbersome deployment process and layers of approvals again. The process is not optimal, and let alone cloud ready, and that is the problem. So challenges of application config management. If the application configuration property is part of the WAR file itself, the entire application need to be deployed for mere property changes, and that is a risky, let alone time consuming and slow. Some keep property config files outside the WAR file in network file storage. Even that needs redeployment approvals, continuous integration jobs, and so on. So let's move on. Let's see what can be done better. So in this diagram, you can see we can, when only properties change, the code does not change, we can just do two things and keep everything else. We don't have to do anything else. We just do push property files to GitHub repository and create config properties in GitHub repo. Change. So in this case, there will be a separate GitHub repository only for properties, and that will be here on the right side, repository for configuration. So now we have two repositories, one repository for code and another Git repository for configuration. And there can be lots of other configurations. You can use other source control, or you may not use source control. You can keep it within the file system of the config service, but I'm not going there. So two things primarily. One time you need to create a GitHub repository that is nothing but a hierarchical folder structure, where the application root denotes your application, and then every folder name denotes your microservice name, the same name that we have in the bootstrap.yml. And then every time after you created the config folder in the GitHub, every time a little property change, maybe a new property is added or a existing property is changed, all you need to do is to commit that change to the GitHub. And what will happen, the microservice configuration service, the remote configuration service, which is Spring Cloud, will get that change from the GitHub repository, and then it will be able to push that change to the target Spring Boot instance. And so we are this way we can be a lot more efficient. We don't have to go through deployment, and it can be a lot faster. So let's see, moving on. So another advantage of Spring Cloud config service, that you can make your microservices listen to property changes without having to restart them. In this architecture, you can see that the admin or DevOps is pushing property changes, and there is a microservice configuration service. If you have a RabbitMQ in between, which is here in between the microservices and the configuration service, the RabbitMQ can get a message from the configuration service, and all the microservices can have act like a listener, listening from RabbitMQ, and whenever property changes, they can act on that without even getting restarted. So that's a very efficient advantage of Spring Cloud remote config service. So that's just another option. So before we go to the circuit breaker, we will stop here, and then we will discuss circuit breaker in the next section of the video series. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any question. I will try to help you as soon as possible. Thank you. Bye.